All right, let's dive into one of my favorite things, American BBQ ribs.
Oh, an excellent choice. It's really an art, more than just throwing some sauce on there.
Absolutely, and our source material today is How to Cook Perfect American BBQ Ribs. It's got all the secrets, right? Turning backyard grilling into, like, competition level amazing.
Yeah, it really does. And it's fascinating? There's a lot of science to it.
Hmm,
We're going to be talking about everything from picking the right ribs to like the actual chemical reactions happening as they cook.
cool. So, basic rib types, I think most people know, like baby backs versus spare ribs.
Right.
But if we're already kind of familiar with those, anything beyond that, like are there special cuts we should be looking for?
Absolutely. Have you ever worked with St. Louis ribs?
I think I've seen those.
They're basically spare ribs, but trimmed down to this like uniform rectangle.
Oh, okay.
So they cook more evenly and there's less waste.
So like maximizing surface area for that flavor, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's country style ribs, which are actually cut from the shoulder, not the rib cage.
Huh.
They're meatier and cook faster, but they don't have that classic rib bone, that structure.
So many options. Okay, let's say we've got our ribs. What are the other key things we need to make these like BBQ heaven?
Well, besides the ribs, the three pillars, the dry rub, the BBQ sauce, and the wood chips, they all work together.
I've always wondered about dry rubs. There's so many different kinds.
Right.
Is there like a magic recipe or is it just personal preference?
It's a bit of both, honestly. You've got the classics, paprika, brown sugar, garlic powder, onion powder, pepper. But the ratios, the specific spices, that's where it gets interesting.
Speaking of paprika,
Yeah.
I've heard there are different types, not just the like regular stuff from the store.
Oh, absolutely. Paprika can be like sweet and mild or smoky and even spicy. Smoked paprika, for example, adds a depth of flavor that you just don't get from regular paprika.
Okay.
It's almost like you're like putting the smoke flavor right in the web.
Thinking about it, some BBQ places, they just have a much deeper, smokier flavor.
Yeah.
Could that be from the paprika?
Yeah, it definitely contributes. And then there's sweet paprika versus hot paprika. Sweet paprika adds color and a little sweetness, while hot paprika brings a bit of heat. Depends what you're going for.
So it's like a custom flavor, like an artist mixing colors.
Exactly. That's what makes BBQ so fun. It's creative. You personalize it every step of the way.
Love that. Okay, what about BBQ sauce? I know that's where things can get very subjective.
Oh, for sure. BBQ sauce is a personal thing. Regional differences are huge. But in general, you're looking for that balance. Tangy, sweet, and smoky.
So like what makes a Carolina sauce different from, let's say, a Texas sauce?
Good question. Carolina sauces are usually vinegar-based. That gives them a tangy, almost sharp flavor. Some even have mustard in them for an extra kick. And then Texas sauces, they're often thicker, sweeter, more focused on that tomato flavor.
It's crazy how geography can change something as simple as BBQ sauce. Okay, last ingredient. Wood chips. I know they're for the smoky flavor, but how do we pick the right kind?
Wood choice is so important. It comes down to preference and what kind of meat you're smoking. Popular choices for ribs are hickory, applewood, and mesquite.
And each wood gives a different flavor, right? Like hickory is stronger, applewood is milder.
You got it. Hickory, that's that classic, strong, smoky BBQ flavor. Applewood is gentler and sweeter, good with pork and poultry. And then mesquite, it's known for that intense, almost earthy flavor. It's often used for beef, but it can be too strong for ribs unless you use it carefully.
Wow, I'm starting to see the complexity of BBQ. Okay, so we've chosen our ribs, we've made our dry rub, we've got our sauce, we've got our wood. What's next? How do we actually cook these things?
First step, prepping the ribs. We need to remove the membrane and trim any excess fat.
Okay, I've heard of removing the membrane, but never really understood why.
That membrane is like a tough layer, connective tissue on the back of the ribs. If you don't remove it, it acts like a barrier. Your rub and the smoke can't get through.
Okay.
Removing it means more flavor gets in and you get a more tender final product.
So it's not just about how it looks, it's about maximizing the flavor and tenderness.
Exactly. Trimming the fat is about balance. You want some fat for flavor and moisture, but too much makes it greasy.
All right, membrane gone, fat trimmed. Now it's time for the fun part, right? Applying the dry rub. How do we make sure that flavor gets in every little bit?
Be generous. Make sure to coat every single surface of the ribs. Don't just sprinkle it on. Really massage it in.
We're giving those ribs a good rub down. So then what? Straight on the grill.
Not so fast. Patience is key in BBQ. You got to let those ribs sit for at least 30 minutes. Let the flavor soak in. And if you really want to maximize flavor, consider putting them in the fridge overnight.
Really? Overnight? Wow. Does the cold help the spices work better or something?
Exactly. Deeper, more intense flavor. Now, while those ribs are chilling, soaking up all that deliciousness, let's talk about the cooking setup itself.
Okay, I'm ready to talk cooking.
Yeah.
What are our options for these beautiful ribs?
Well, we've got the charcoal grill, the gas grill, and the smoker. Each has its own pluses and minuses.
For someone who's kind of new to this, what would you recommend?
Honestly, you can get amazing results with any of them. Charcoal gives you that classic smoky flavor, but it takes a bit more skill to control the temperature. Gas grills are easy to use, precise temperature control, but maybe they lack that authentic smoky depth. And smokers, they're designed for this low and slow cooking, but they can be more expensive.
So it's finding what works for your skill level and budget.
Exactly. But no matter what you use, the key is indirect heat.
Indirect heat, how's that different from just, direct heat?
Direct heat is when the flames are right under the food, like when you're grilling burgers. Indirect heat means the heat source is off to the side, so it cooks more gently and evenly.
Oh, so no blasting those ribs with direct flames.
Nope, that would just burn the outside before the inside's even cooked. Low and slow, indirect heat lets the collagen in the ribs break down. That's what makes them fall off the bone tender.
Okay, starting to understand the science now. So how long do we cook these things? What temperature are we looking for?
Low and slow, remember, we're aiming for 225 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's lower than I thought.
It's all about patience. Cooking time depends on the ribs, but usually 3 to 5 hours.
Wow, okay, commitment. But I bet it's worth it.
Totally worth it. And speaking of patience, there's this cool technique some pit masters use to make sure the ribs are extra tender. They wrap them in foil partway through.
Wait, foil, I've heard of that, but never got how it works. Is that only for, real BBQ experts?
It's not as hard as it sounds. It's called the Texas crutch. You wrap the ribs in foil with a little liquid like apple juice, beer, even water. The foil traps the moisture and heat, basically steams the ribs.
Oh, so there's like a little sauna for the ribs.
Yeah. But why do it? Well, it can speed up cooking and makes them super tender. But some people say it can make the bark less crispy. The bark is that crust on the outside.
Interesting. So tender ribs, but maybe less crispy bark. A trade-off.
Kind of, yeah. It depends what you're going for, Some
Yeah.
people want fall-off-the-bone tenderness no matter what. Others, they think that crispy bark is super important.
Like choosing between a perfectly seared steak and a melt-in-your-mouth pot roast, right? Both delicious, but different textures.
Great analogy. It's all about what you like.
Okay, I'm getting the Texas crutch now.
Yeah.
So say we're going traditional, no foil. How do we know when those ribs are done?
2 things. The bend test and the internal temperature.
I've heard of the bend test, but not sure I really get it.
It's a visual check, Lift the ribs carefully with tongs. If they bend and crack a little but don't break apart, they're almost there.
So we want a little give, but not a total collapse.
Exactly. Too stiff, they need more time. Too easy to break, they might be overcooked.
And the temperature. How hot should those ribs be?
A meat thermometer is the best way to know for sure. For ribs, you want between 190 and 203 degrees Fahrenheit.
Got it. Bendy, but not falling apart, and at the right temperature. What do we do when they reach that point?
Take them off the heat and let them rest. This lets the juices redistribute, makes them even more tender and flavorful.
Like resting any meat, right? Lets the fibers relax and soak up those juices.
Exactly. For ribs, 10 to 15 minutes is perfect. You can loosely tent them with foil to keep them warm.
This is it, the moment we've been waiting for. Ribs are rested, time to slice and serve. Any tips for making them look amazing?
Slice them between the bones, arrange them nicely on a platter, and of course, extra BBQ sauce on the side for dipping. Some people brush more sauce on before serving, but I like to let the ribs speak for themselves. Guests can add sauce if they want.
Nice. Okay, I think we've got the basics down for cooking awesome ribs. But what about those pro tips you mentioned? Anything that can really take our BBQ to the next level?
One of the biggest things is patience. It's essential in BBQ. Low and slow is how you get tender, flavorful ribs. Don't rush it.
I've definitely tried to rush it before. Learned my lesson. BBQ is about taking it slow.
Exactly. And another tip, don't overdo the smoke. That smoky flavor is important, but too much can overpower the taste of the meat.
So finding that balance of smoke, how do we do that?
Start small with the wood chips, experiment. Different woods have different intensities, and everyone has their own taste.
This is where the art comes in, right? Finding your own style.
Exactly. And that goes for dry rubs and sauces too. Try different things. Add different spices, herbs, maybe a touch of sweetness. Make it your own.
I love that. What are some, like, unique or surprising flavor combinations you've tried?
Well, once I tried a dry rub with a little coffee and cocoa powder.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it added this rich, earthy depth that went great with the smoke. And for sauces, you can use different vinegars like apple cider or balsamic, or even add some fruit like mango or pineapple for something different.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I got to try that coffee and cocoa rub.
Right. BBQ is all about having fun and trying new things, so get creative and see what you discover.
Okay, final tip. Practice makes perfect.
Absolutely. Don't worry if your first few tries aren't perfect. BBQ is a journey. You learn something every time.
Good reminder. It's easy to get intimidated by all the techniques, but BBQ is about enjoying the process, experimenting as you go.
Exactly. Embrace the challenge, have fun, and before you know it, you'll be grilling ribs that people can't get enough of.
That's the goal. Okay, we covered a lot today, picking the right ribs, low and slow cooking, even the Texas crutch.
It's been a delicious journey. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to fire up their grills and make some BBQ magic.
Me too. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about something. We talked about different BBQ sauces from different regions. What are your favorites?
Oh, that's a tough one. I love them all, but I have a soft spot for the Carolina vinegar-based sauces. That tangy flavor cuts through the richness of the ribs perfectly. What about you? Any favorites?
I'm a big fan of the Kansas City style. That sweet, smoky, tangy balance is just perfect.
Great choice. And it's amazing how these regional preferences developed over time. They reflect the culture and the food of each place.
It really shows the diversity and richness of American BBQ. Okay, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. Now it's their turn to put all this knowledge into practice and make some amazing BBQ. So before the break, we were talking Texas crutch. Almost sounds like a secret weapon, right?
It can really up your rib game, but like any shortcut, there are things to think about, good and bad.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What are the main advantages of using this Texas crutch?
Well, it can cut down on your cooking time, big time, especially for larger ribs or if you're, short on time.
Makes sense.
The foil's like an oven, traps the heat and steam, really helps break down those tough parts faster.
So speed and tenderness, those are the big wins.
Exactly. And it can help keep the ribs from drying out, especially if it's dry where you are or your grill loses a lot of moisture.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But what about the downsides? You mentioned something about the bark before.
Right. That's what some pitmasters worry about. Wrapping in foil can trap moisture, which can make the bark softer. That nice crispy crust on the outside.
Right, right.
Some people feel like a really great rack of ribs needs that perfect bark.
So it's like tenderness versus bark.
Yeah, in a way. It depends what's important to you, what you think makes perfect ribs. Some people, they want fall off the bone tenderness no matter what. Others, they think that crispy, flavorful bark is essential.
Yeah, I get that.
It's really a matter of personal preference.
All right, so let's say we're sticking with tradition, no foil. How do we know when they're done? What should we be looking for?
There are a couple of ways to tell. There's the bend test and then checking the internal temperature.
I've heard about the bend test, but I don't think I really understand it.
It's just a way to see how tender the ribs are. You gently lift them up with tongs. If they bend a little and crack but don't break all the way, that's a good sign.
So like a little flexible but not falling apart.
You got it. If they're still stiff and don't bend, they need more time. If they break easily, you might overcook them.
Makes sense. And what about temperature? Like how hot should they be inside?
A meat thermometer is the most accurate way to know. You're looking for between 190 and 203 degrees Fahrenheit for ribs.
All right, so bendy but not falling apart and the right temperature. Then what?
Then you take them off the heat and let them rest. Super important. It lets those juices redistribute, makes them even more tender and flavorful.
Yeah, resting's important for all meat, right? Gives it a chance to relax and reabsorb those juices.
Exactly. For ribs, about 10-15 minutes is all you need. You can loosely cover them with foil to keep them warm while they rest.
Okay, here we go. The moment of truth. Ribs are rested. It's time to slice and serve. Any presentation tips?
Slice between the bones, arrange them nicely on a platter. Don't forget extra BBQ sauce on the side. Some people like to brush on more sauce right before serving, but I think it's nice to let the ribs shine and let people add sauce if they want.
I like that. Okay, so I've got the cooking process down. What about those pro tips you mentioned? Things that can really elevate our BBQ skills.
Well, one of the most important things is patience. I know we've said it before, but it's crucial for good BBQ. Low and slow cooking, that's the key to tender, flavorful ribs. Don't rush it.
I've definitely been guilty of rushing it before, but I've learned my lesson.
Yeah.
BBQ is all about taking your time.
Exactly. And another tip, don't get carried away with the smoke. That smoky flavor is great, but too much can be overpowering. You want to taste the meat, too.
Right, right. So finding that balance of smoke, any tips on that?
Start with a little bit of wood chips and see what you like. Different woods have different intensities, and it really comes down to what you prefer.
Yeah, that's where the art comes in, finding what you like.
For sure. And the same goes for dry rubs and sauces. Experiment. Add different spices, herbs, maybe a touch of sweetness. Don't be afraid to get creative and personalize it.
I love that. What are some, unusual or surprising combinations you've tried? Or maybe ones you want to try?
Well, I once made a dry rub with a little bit of coffee and cocoa powder.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, it gave it this rich, earthy flavor that went so well with the smokiness. And for sauces, you could try different kinds of vinegar, like apple cider or balsamic. You could even add some fruit, like mango or pineapple, for something different.
Oh, those sound amazing.
Yeah.
I definitely want to try that coffee and cocoa rub.
See? BBQ is all about having fun and trying new things. Get creative and see what you discover.
Okay, last tip. Practice makes perfect.
Right, absolutely. Don't get discouraged if your first few attempts aren't perfect. It takes time to get good at BBQ. Every time you cook, you learn something new.
Yeah, good reminder. It's easy to get intimidated, but it's really about having fun with it, experimenting and learning as you go.
I couldn't agree more. Embrace the challenge, have fun, and before you know it, you'll be making ribs that people rave about.
That's the dream. All right, we've covered a lot today. Choosing the right ribs, low and slow cooking, even the Texas crutch.
It's been a delicious journey. I hope everyone listening is feeling inspired and ready to get grilling.
Me too. But before we wrap up, I have a question. Earlier we talked about all those different BBQ sauces from different regions. Do you have any favorites?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I appreciate all the regional styles, but I have a soft spot for those Carolina vinegar-based sauces. That tangy flavor cuts through the richness of the ribs, just perfect. How about you? Any favorites?
I'm a big fan of Kansas City style. That sweet, smoky, tangy balance. It's just right.
Excellent choice. And it's amazing how all these regional preferences develop. They really reflect the culture and the food of each place.
Yeah, it really speaks to the diversity and the richness of American BBQ.
Okay, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today. Now it's time for everyone to put all this knowledge to use and create some amazing BBQ.
I can't wait to see what everyone comes up with. Happy grilling. Happy grilling. We talked about picking the right ribs, all those rubs and sauces, even that Texas crutch thing. But there's something else about BBQ, right? It's not just about the food.
Absolutely. BBQ is social. It brings people together.
It is. It's about getting together with friends and family, sharing stories and enjoying those smoky flavors. There's something special about cooking over a fire, too.
It is. Almost takes us back to our roots, back when cooking was a social event, something everyone did together.
And that's still true today. Whether it's just a backyard BBQ or a big competition, BBQ brings people together.
And it goes beyond cultures, too. You see different kinds of barbecue all over the world, each with its own flavors and traditions.
It's pretty cool how one way of cooking can have such an impact on people all over the world. So for our listeners out there who might be thinking about having their own BBQ get-togethers, what tips do you have for creating that perfect BBQ experience?
The most important thing, don't worry about being perfect. It's about making people feel welcome, having fun and enjoying each other's company. Don't stress if everything isn't exactly planned or perfect.
So go with the flow.
Yeah.
Enjoy the little mistakes, the things that make each BBQ unique.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be afraid to get everyone involved. Have your guests help with prepping, tending the fire, even making their own sauces.
Love that. Makes it a group effort, everyone working together. And what about music? Music's got to be important, right? Sets the mood.
For sure. Pick a playlist that fits the vibe you're going for. Some classic blues, rock and roll, even some country can really add to the atmosphere.
Oh, and games. Backyard BBQs and games go hand in hand.
Definitely. Games are fun and they get people interacting.
Okay, I think we've covered everything for an amazing BBQ. But before we finish up our deep dive, I want to leave everyone with a question to think about.
Sounds good. What's the question?
So we've learned all about BBQ ribs, the
Yeah.
techniques, the culture, everything. What will your next BBQ adventure be? Will you have a big get-together? Try some crazy new flavor? Maybe travel somewhere to try their BBQ?
I love it. I challenge everyone listening to embrace their inner pit master,
Hmm?
explore all the different kinds of barbecue out there, be open to new things, and most importantly, share your passion for BBQ with everyone.
Well said. It's been great talking about American BBQ ribs with you and all our listeners.
The pleasure was all mine. Happy grilling, everyone.
Happy grilling.